My name is Samantha Dean, and I used to believe that loyalty was worth something in Silicon Valley. I spent 6 years building Neurovanta Labs from a garage startup into a neural interface powerhouse worth $500 million. Every line of code, every patent filing, every breakthrough that made investors' eyes light up with dollar signs, I wrote them all. But I made one critical mistake. I thought being indispensable meant being safe. The morning everything changed started like any other. I arrived at our Palo Alto offices at 6:47 a.m., as I had every day for the past 6 years. The security guard, Marcus, gave me his usual nod. The espresso machine in the kitchen made its familiar grinding sound as I prepared my first of many cups. I settled into my corner office, one of the few perks I'd negotiated when we moved from that cramped garage, and pulled up the latest test results from our neural mapping algorithms. That's when I noticed the meeting invite. 9 a.m., boardroom, mandatory attendance, no agenda listed. In 6 years, I'd learned to read the corporate tea leaves. Unscheduled board meetings meant one of 3 things: acquisition offers, emergency funding rounds, or leadership changes. Given our recent Series C success, I suspected the first. How wrong I was. At 8:58 a.m., I walked into the boardroom to find our investors already seated, their faces carefully neutral. David Marsh, our lead investor from Apex Ventures, wouldn't meet my eyes. That should have been my first warning. The second was the woman sitting at the head of the table in what had always been my seat during technical presentations. She was everything I wasn't. Polished in that specific Silicon Valley way that screamed Stanford MBA and TED Talk speaker, her blazer cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her smile could have powered a small city, but her eyes remained calculating, assessing, dismissing. "Samantha." David finally spoke, his voice carrying that particular tone executives use when they're about to destroy your world while making it sound reasonable. "I'd like you to meet Veronica Lane. She'll be taking over as CEO, effective immediately." I felt the words hit me like physical blows, but I kept my face neutral. In the Shark Tank of tech startups, showing weakness was blood in the water. "I see," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "And my position." Veronica's smile widened, and I saw the predator beneath the polish. "We'll be restructuring the entire leadership team to better position Neurovanta for its next growth phase. You've done incredible work building our technical foundation, but it's time for fresh perspectives." Fresh perspectives. In corporate speak, that meant one thing: you're out. "I'll need you to transition your responsibilities to our new CTO," she continued, sliding a folder across the table. "Harrison Chen joins us from Meta's Reality Labs division." I opened the folder, scanning the termination agreement disguised as a transition plan. They were offering me 3 months severance and a consultant role. Then I reached the final page, and my blood turned to ice. "Special Technical Intern," I read aloud, not quite believing the words. "It's a unique position we've created," Veronica said, her tone suggesting she was doing me a favor. "You'll support Harrison during the transition, ensuring continuity of our technical operations. The internship stipend is industry standard." Industry standard for interns, she meant. After 6 years of 80-hour weeks, of solving problems that had stumped teams at Google and Apple, of building technology that neurologists called impossible, they were demoting me to an intern. The insult was surgical in its precision. "This is about the equity redistribution, isn't it?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. 3 months ago, I'd refused to sign away additional shares during the Series C negotiations. I owned 15% of the company, enough to have a real voice, enough to be a problem for anyone wanting unchallenged control. David shifted uncomfortably. "Samantha, this isn't personal." "Of course it's personal," I interrupted, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. "Everything in business is personal when you strip away the LinkedIn speak." I gathered the papers, stood, and looked directly at Veronica. "I'll review these with my attorney." Her smile never wavered. "Naturally. Though I should mention, your current employment agreement includes comprehensive non-compete and IP assignment clauses. I'd hate for this to become complicated. There it was, the threat wrapped in legal silk. Sign the papers, accept the humiliation, or face a lawsuit that would drain my savings and destroy my reputation. Most people would have folded. Most people hadn't spent 4 years reading every single legal document that crossed their desk, memorizing every clause, every loophole, every carefully negotiated exception. "I'll be in touch," I said, and left the room with my head high and my mind racing. Back in my office, how much longer would it be mine? I locked the door and pulled up a document I'd hoped never to need. 4 years ago, during our Series A funding, I'd insisted on something our lawyers called unusual but not unprecedented, a retention of inventor rights clause, buried on page 47 of the investment agreement, in language so dense even experienced attorneys might skim past it, was my insurance policy. The clause stated that while Neurovanta owned all work product created during my employment, I retained personal licensing rights to the core neural mapping algorithms, the foundation everything else was built on. More importantly, if I was terminated or demoted without cause and without my written consent, those licensing rights became exclusive to me. The company would need my permission to continue using the technology I'd created. I'd fought for that clause through 3 weeks of negotiations, finally getting it approved when I threatened to walk away entirely. The investors thought I was being paranoid. David had laughed, saying no one would ever push out a founding CTO who was clearly irreplaceable. Irreplaceable. What a joke that seemed now. I spent the next 3 hours in my office, systematically copying every piece of documentation I was legally entitled to emails discussing the technology development, patent filings with my name, board meeting minutes where they'd praised my innovations. Everything went to my personal attorney, Harriet Kessler, a former software engineer turned lawyer who specialized in protecting technical founders from exactly this kind of corporate betrayal. By noon, word had spread through the office, the sympathetic looks from junior engineers, the avoided eye contact from senior staff who knew which way the wind was blowing, the whispered conversations that stopped when I passed. I'd seen this movie before, just never thought I'd be starring in it. Harrison Chen arrived that afternoon, all smiles and false humility. "Samantha, I've heard incredible things about your work. I'm looking forward to learning from you during this transition." I smiled back, matching his fake warmth with my own. "I'm sure you are." He wanted access to the development servers immediately. I gave him exactly what my employment contract required: standard user credentials, with read-only access to production systems. When he pushed for administrative privileges, I cited security protocols that I'd written myself. "But I'm the CTO," he protested. "Not according to the systems," I replied calmly. "It needs written authorization from the board to modify access levels for critical infrastructure. I'm sure Veronica can arrange that. Eventually." It was petty, but I was past caring. They wanted to humiliate me. Fine, but I'd follow every rule, every protocol, every bureaucratic procedure I'd put in place to protect our technology. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. The real satisfaction came 3 days later when Harriet called. "Sam, I've reviewed everything. That retention clause is ironclad. Better yet, they've already violated it by demoting you without written consent. What's our play?" "We wait. Let them think you're beaten. Meanwhile, we document everything. Every email where they discuss the technology, every presentation where they claim credit for your work, every investor meeting where they showcase their innovations. When the time comes, we'll have enough evidence to bury them." So I played the part of the defeated founder. I showed up to my humiliating internship, fetching coffee for Harrison while he struggled to understand code architecture that had taken me years to perfect. I sat in meetings where Veronica presented my innovations as evidence of her technical vision. I watched her charm investors with promises of revolutionary breakthroughs, all built on foundations she didn't understand and couldn't replicate. The beautiful thing about arrogance is how blind it makes people. Veronica was so confident in her victory that she never bothered to read past page 10 of the investment documents. Harrison was so eager to take credit that he never questioned why certain critical functions required my personal authorization to modify. The board was so dazzled by Veronica's PR machine that they never asked why their intern still had to approve every major technical decision. 3 weeks into my internship, I began Phase 2, late at night. Using my legitimate access to maintain system stability, I started documenting something interesting. Our neural mapping algorithms weren't just integrated into the codebase, they were the codebase. Every function, every process, every innovation built over the past 4 years was dependent on the core technology I'd created and retained rights to. It was like discovering that someone had built a skyscraper on land you still owned. They might own the building, but without the land, all they had was a very expensive pile of rubble. I created detailed documentation showing these dependencies, how removing my algorithms would essentially require rebuilding the entire platform from scratch, a process that would take years and millions of dollars. I packaged it all into a neat technical report, ostensibly for knowledge transfer to Harrison. He thanked me for being so thorough. If only he'd actually read it. The opportunity I'd been waiting for came in week 5. Veronica had arranged a massive demo for Google Ventures, our potential lead investor for a Series D round that would value Neurovanta at $500 million. She'd been hyping this meeting for weeks, promising a live demonstration of our latest neural interface processing real-time thoughts into digital commands. The night before the demo, I received an email from Harrison. He needed admin access to push a last-minute update, something about optimizing the display protocols for the presentation. I responded promptly, professionally, explaining that any modifications to core systems required 48-hour notice per the protocols he'd agreed to follow. "This is urgent," he wrote back. "Veronica specifically wants these changes." "I understand," I replied. "However, rushing updates without proper testing could destabilize the entire system. I'm sure Veronica wouldn't want to risk technical failures during such an important demonstration." The email chain that followed was a masterpiece of corporate passive aggression. Harrison threatened to escalate. I welcomed him to do so, citing my responsibility to maintain system integrity. Veronica herself finally chimed in, ordering me to comply. That's when I played my card. "I'd be happy to help," I wrote, "but I should mention that any modifications to the neural mapping core require licensing authorization from the rights holder. According to our legal documentation, that would be me. I'm afraid my attorney has advised me not to grant any new licenses until we resolve the terms of my current employment situation." The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear the panic through the computer screen as they finally read the documents they should have reviewed weeks ago. Harriet called me an hour later, laughing. "They're in full meltdown mode. Their legal team just realized what you own versus what they own. They want an emergency meeting. Tell them I'm unavailable. Interns don't set their own schedules." The demo day arrived with the crisp clarity of a Palo Alto morning. I arrived at the office early, made myself a coffee, and settled into the observation room where I could watch the main conference hall on monitors. The Google Ventures team arrived in a fleet of Teslas, all sharp suits and sharper questions. Veronica met them with her megawatt smile and promises of revolutionary technology. The presentation started smoothly enough. Veronica's slides were polished, her delivery flawless. She spoke about innovation and disruption with the practiced ease of someone who'd memorized every Silicon Valley buzzword. The investors nodded along, suitably impressed by the vision she painted. Then came the live demo. Harrison took the stage, our latest neural interface headset in hand. He explained how they would demonstrate real-time thought-to-text conversion, showing how their proprietary algorithms could interpret neural signals with unprecedented accuracy. The volunteer put on the headset. Harrison initiated the system. For a moment, everything worked perfectly. The screens showed neural activity. Processing indicators flashed green. The audience leaned forward in anticipation. Then the error message appeared. "License expired. Contact creator." Harrison's face went pale. He tried to restart the system. Same message. He typed frantically, trying to bypass the error. The system wouldn't budge. "It seems we're having some technical difficulties," Veronica said, her smile finally cracking. "Harrison, The system is locked, he admitted, his voice barely audible over the microphone. One of the Google Ventures partners, a woman named Patricia Kemp, who'd built her reputation on technical due diligence, leaned forward. Locked. What do you mean, locked? That's when I stood up in the observation room, knowing the cameras would catch me. I didn't need to say anything. My presence alone sent the message. The meeting dissolved into chaos, investors demanding explanations, Veronica trying to maintain control, Harrison fumbling with technical jargon he didn't fully understand, and through it all, I stood there, visible through the glass, a reminder that they'd tried to build an empire on foundations they didn't own. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The Google Ventures team left without signing anything. Patricia Kemp reportedly telling colleagues that Neurovanta had fatal governance issues. Word spread through the Valley's gossip network at the speed of light. By evening, TechCrunch had picked up the story. Neurovanta demo disaster raises questions about leadership. Veronica called an emergency all-hands meeting that evening. I didn't attend. Interns weren't required at strategic sessions, but I heard about it later from the engineers who'd remained loyal. She tried to spin it as a minor technical glitch, promised it would be resolved soon, assured everyone that the company's future remained bright. No one believed her. The next morning, Harriet and I met with Neurovanta's legal team. They came prepared for war, 3 lawyers from Wilson Sonsini, the Valley's most feared firm. I came with Harriet and a simple proposition. My client owns the exclusive license to the neural mapping algorithms, Harriet began, placing a thick folder of documentation on the table. Every product Neurovanta has developed, every patent filed, every line of code written in the past 4 years is built on this foundation. Without Ms. Dean's cooperation, you have no viable product. This is extortion, their lead counsel, James Morrison, sputtered. No, Harriet replied calmly. This is contract law. Your client signed these agreements. They chose to demote Ms. Dean without cause and without her written consent, triggering the exclusivity clause. We're simply enforcing the terms they agreed to. What do you want? Morrison asked, cutting to the chase. I spoke for the first time. Nothing. The room went silent. I don't want money. I don't want my job back. I don't want recognition or apologies or whatever else you think might make this go away. I want nothing from Neurovanta. Then why? Because I've already gotten what I wanted. You tried to humiliate me, to reduce me to nothing, to steal what I built. You failed. Now you get to explain to your investors why their $500 million valuation is worthless without the cooperation of an intern. Morrison's face flushed. Be reasonable. You're destroying the company. No, I corrected him. Veronica destroyed the company the moment she decided I was expendable. I'm just ensuring everyone knows it. We left them with one option. Neurovanta could continue operating their existing products under a limited license, but any new development, any innovation, any growth would require my approval. The terms I offered were deliberately impossible approval rights over every technical decision, consultation fees that would bankrupt them, restrictions that would make it impossible to raise new funding. They had 72 hours to decide. While they panicked, I made a phone call I'd been contemplating for weeks. Synex Core Technologies had been Neurovanta's biggest rival since the beginning. Their CEO, Marcus Rodriguez, had tried to poach me 3 times over the years. Each time, I'd turned him down out of loyalty. Loyalty. What a quaint concept that seemed now. Samantha, Marcus said when he picked up. I heard about the Google Ventures situation. Rough break. How would you like to eliminate your biggest competitor? I asked without preamble. The pause that followed was brief. I'm listening. We met that afternoon at a discreet hotel bar in San Francisco. Marcus brought his CTO and head counsel. I brought Harriet and a proposal that made their eyes widen. You're offering us exclusive rights to the neural mapping technology, Marcus asked, barely containing his excitement. For $1, I confirmed, plus a signing bonus of $1 million, a C-suite position of my choosing, and 40% equity in the subsidiary we'll create to commercialize it. That's generous, his lawyer said suspiciously. What's the catch? No catch. I want Neurovanta buried, and I want everyone in the valley to know why. You get the technology that's 5 years ahead of anything else on the market. I get vindication. Win-win. Marcus smiled. When do we announce? Give me 48 hours. I want Veronica to sweat a little longer. Those 48 hours were perhaps the most satisfying of my professional life. I continued showing up to my internship, watching the panic spread through the office like wildfire. Engineers updated their LinkedIn profiles. Sales staff took long lunches that turned into interviews. The vultures of Silicon Valley began circling, smelling blood in the water. Veronica tried everything. She sent friendly emails suggesting we align on a path forward. She had board members call with offers to revisit my role. She even showed up at my desk, designer heels clicking on the polished concrete, smile fixed like a mask. Samantha, surely we can work this out. You built this company. Don't you care what happens to it? I looked up from the code review I was doing, still maintaining the systems, still doing my job, just not the one she'd assigned me. I built the technology. You built the politics. Seems fair that we each keep what we created. You're really going to destroy hundreds of jobs over a personal grudge? No, I replied evenly. You destroyed those jobs when you decided growth meant stepping on the people who got you here. I'm just refusing to be your stepping stone. She left without another word. The next morning, she didn't come to the office at all. The Neurovanta board called an emergency meeting on day 3. By then, news of the Synex Core deal had leaked, strategic leaks being another Silicon Valley art form. The combination of the failed demo, the licensing crisis, and their biggest rival gaining their core technology created a perfect storm of investor panic. Harrison Chen, to his credit, tried to salvage something. He presented a plan to rebuild the neural mapping system from scratch, claimed he could reverse engineer my work in 6 months. The board's technical advisor, someone who actually understood the complexity involved, laughed out loud. 6 months. Try 6 years, if they were lucky. By 4 p.m., Veronica Lane had resigned to pursue other opportunities. The board approached me with a desperate offer return as CTO. Name my price, save the company I'd helped build. That's a generous offer, I told them. Unfortunately, I've already accepted a position elsewhere. The announcement went live an hour later. Synex Core Technologies acquires groundbreaking neural interface technology. The press release was carefully crafted to be factual, professional, and absolutely devastating. It mentioned the technology's origins at Neurovanta. It noted my role as the inventor. It didn't need to spell out what everyone in the valley would understand. I'd taken my ball and gone home, leaving Neurovanta with nothing but office furniture and shattered dreams. The aftermath was everything I'd imagined, and more. Tech blogs dissected the story with headlines like, "The Intern Who Killed a Unicorn," and "How Not to Fire Your CTO." Veronica's reputation in the valley evaporated overnight. Turns out investors don't like executives who destroy value through ego and ignorance. Harrison Chen quietly returned to Meta. His brief stint as CTO scrubbed from most of his public profiles. Neurovanta limped along for another 3 months before accepting an acquisition offer from a medical device company. The price, $12 million, a company once valued at $500 million, sold for less than the cost of our Series A round. The investors lost everything. The employees who'd remained loyal got pennies on their options. The technology that could have revolutionized human-computer interaction became a footnote in a cautionary tale. As for me, I became Chief Strategy Officer at Synex Core, leading the Neural Interface Division. We launched our first product 6 months later, everything Neurovanta had promised but never delivered. The technology thrived in an environment where innovation mattered more than politics, where the people who built things were valued more than those who just talked about them. But this isn't really a success story. It's a warning. Silicon Valley runs on a mythology of disruption and innovation, but underneath the ping-pong tables and free kombucha, it's just another corporate battlefield. The only difference is that the knives are hidden behind smiles and the blood is measured in cap tables and burn rates. Every founder thinks they're irreplaceable until the board decides otherwise. Every engineer believes their code speaks for itself until someone else takes credit for it. Every early employee assumes their loyalty will be rewarded until they're handed a cardboard box and a severance check. I was lucky. I was paranoid enough to protect myself, skilled enough to be truly irreplaceable, and ruthless enough to burn it all down when pushed. Most people aren't that lucky. Most people sign whatever papers are put in front of them, accept whatever treatment they're given, and hope that playing nice will somehow protect them. It won't. The Veronicas of the world succeed because people like me usually fold. We're too attached to what we've built, too proud to fight dirty, too naive to realize that business is war by other means. We tell ourselves stories about meritocracy and fairness while the sharks circle closer. I don't feel guilty about what happened to Neurovanta. They made their choice when they decided I was disposable. Every action that followed was just consequence following cause, as inevitable as gravity. You can't build a castle on someone else's land and then act surprised when they exercise their property rights. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the technology we could have built together, the problems we could have solved, the future we could have created. Then I remember sitting in that boardroom, being told I was a legacy drag by someone who couldn't write a line of code to save her life, and any regret evaporates. They wanted to teach me about power lesson learned. Power isn't about titles or corner offices or keynote speeches. Power is owning something essential and knowing exactly what it's worth. Power is patience, preparation, and the willingness to walk away from everything you've built rather than let someone else steal it. Most importantly, power is understanding that in Silicon Valley, loyalty is a luxury you can't afford, and the only person who will protect your interests is you. Veronica Lane learned that lesson too late. At a cost of $488 million, it might be the most expensive education in Valley history. But then again, she always did like to do things at scale. As for me, I'm still building, still coding, still solving problems that others call impossible. The only difference is now, I do it surrounded by people who understand that innovation isn't about slide decks and buzzwords. It's about the code that runs at 3 a.m., the algorithms that push the boundaries of what's possible, and the people crazy enough to build the future one function at a time. My name is Samantha Dean. I'm not a cautionary tale or a success story. I'm just an engineer who refused to be erased, a founder who read the fine print, and proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't living well. It's living by your own terms, enforcing your own contracts, and watching those who underestimated you learn exactly how much they didn't know. They called me an intern. I called their bluff. In Silicon Valley. That's the only game that really matters. The neural interface industry has exploded since then. Every major tech company now has a brain-computer division. The technology I pioneered has helped paralyzed patients communicate, enabled new forms of human-computer interaction, and opened doors we're only beginning to explore. Sometimes journalists ask if I regret the way things ended with Neurovanta, if I wish I'd found a way to save the company I'd helped build. I tell them the truth. Neurovanta died the moment they decided innovation was less important than office politics. I just made sure everyone knew who killed it. These days, I spend most of my time in the lab, pushing the boundaries of what's possible. My team at Synex Core includes some of the best engineers who fled Neurovanta during the collapse. We don't have fancy titles or corporate hierarchies. We have problems to solve and the freedom to solve them. Last month, we achieved something Neurovanta had promised, but never delivered real-time translation of complex thoughts into digital commands with 97% accuracy. The demo was flawless. No error messages, no licensing issues, just pure innovation. The way it should be. After the presentation, a young engineer approached me. She'd just graduated from Stanford, full of dreams about changing the world through technology. She reminded me of myself 6 years ago, before I learned how the Valley really works. "Any advice for someone just starting out?" she asked. I thought about giving her the standard Silicon Valley pep talk about passion and perseverance. Instead, I told her the truth. Read every contract, document everything, trust your instincts, and never, ever let anyone convince you that the person who builds the technology matters less than the person who sells it." She looked surprised. Maybe she expected something more inspirational, less cynical. But inspiration without preparation is just naivety wearing a motivational poster. "One more thing," I added. "If someone tries to demote you to intern after you've built the company's core technology, make sure you own the license to that technology. Trust me on that one." She laughed, thinking I was joking. In a few years, when she's been through her first startup betrayal, she'll understand I was giving her the most valuable advice anyone in Silicon Valley can offer: protect yourself, because no one else will. The conference room where Veronica announced my demotion has been converted to a meditation space at Neurovanta's old offices. The company that bought the building thought it would be good for employee wellness. There's something poetic about that, a place where corporate ambition destroyed years of innovation, now dedicated to mindfulness and reflection. I visited once, out of curiosity. The space felt smaller than I remembered. The table where I'd signed my first employment agreement, where I'd celebrated funding rounds, where I'd been told I was expendable, it was just furniture in the end, wood and metal and fading memories. But the code I wrote, the algorithms I developed, the technology I protected that lives on, evolving and improving, solving problems and changing lives, long after the last person forgets Veronica Lane's name or Neurovanta's failed promises, the work will endure. That's the difference between builders and politicians, between innovation and ambition. One creates things that matter. The other creates press releases that everyone forgets. My name is Samantha Dean. I'm not an intern, and I never was. I'm an engineer, an inventor, and living proof that sometimes the best code you can write is the contract that protects everything else you build. In Silicon Valley, that might be the most revolutionary innovation of all.